A very good evening to one and all present over here. Myself, Dr. Sheena. So today we'll be the second part of the dental materials. That is the most commonly and most frequently asked question, and a very brief description on each question. So going to the first question, the three type of abrasives used in dentistry can be classified as except. So we know that there are various types of abrasives that are used for the various cements, for finishing and polishing the various cements, for finishing and polishing composites, even ceramics. So which is not being considered as an abrasive? That is the question. So the options are: first is polishing abrasive, second is finishing abrasive, third is bleaching abrasive, and fourth is cleansing abrasive. So we know that finishing abrasives are there, like the carborundum disc, polishing abrasives are there, cleansing abrasives are there, but bleaching abrasives are not abrasives which are used for this purpose, but they are actually used for bleaching purpose. So bleaching abrasives are the answer, which is different. That is different from the abrasives that is used for the purpose which has been indicated here. So that is the answer. Third one, bleaching abrasives. Next question. What is incorrect regarding the boric ceramics? So we know that there are ceramics, right? What are ceramics? Ceramics is a combination of non-metallic structure like glass, feldspar is there, which is the classical ceramic that are been made into various composition based on the fusion temperature or the firing temperature. So the question is, what is incorrect regarding boric ceramic? So they form glass phase. Of course, they form glass phase. Uh, Another important goodness of boric ceramics are there. They form a very separate lattice interspread with actually the silica. They form a separate lattice. They does not actually join together with the remaining lattice, and it strengthens the surrounding structure. Borate is added for actually strengthening the ceramic. So the answer is like second point, increasing the viscosity of metal. So that is a very wrong answer. They are actually used for decreasing the viscosity. They often decrease the viscosity of metal. So which is the incorrect answer is they actually decrease the viscosity of metal. So this is a very important point that you have to keep in mind. For that, you have to know the important features of adding a boric oxide. See, boric oxide are those which act as a glass modifier. So what is a glass modifier? They are actually used to decrease the viscosity and to lower the softening temperature and to form its own glass network. That is a very important property of boric oxide because they form its own glass network and they do not join or culminate with the remaining glass structure. Because boric oxide forms a separate lattice interspread with the silica lattice, it still interrupt the more rigid silica network and lowers the softening point of the glass. So these are the important point that you have to keep in mind. They actually decrease viscosity. That is a very important point that you have to keep whenever boric oxide is being added to ceramic. The next question, for air blasting of ceramic veneer, the particle size of alumina is used. So, whenever we do a ceramic veneer, so we have to prepare the veneer surface as well as the tooth surface, right? So, there the veneer surface is prepared or the glaze of the veneer is removed by a process called as sandblasting. Now, what is sandblasting? Sandblasting is a procedure where we'll be using this aluminum oxide powder, which is having a size of 50 micrometer for 2 to 4 seconds. So 2 to 4 seconds, we'll be actually allowing the aluminum oxide to blast on the surface of the glazed ceramic 2 to 4 seconds. Afterwards, the surface is prepared with the help of hydrofluoric acid. We know that 9.6% of hydrofluoric acid is normally used. For how many minutes? It is used for actually 2 minutes. And after that, that surface is actually etched and we'll be actually applying the material and that is ceramic is being bonded to the surface. So this is a procedure of bonding a veneer, that is a ceramic veneer to the tooth structure. So the question is like, what is the size of the aluminum oxide that we use for blasting the surface? That is 50 micrometer. That is very important. Next question. Which of the following is not a natural abrasive? For that, we know that there are two types of abrasives, natural abrasives and synthetic abrasives. So you have to know this first. Natural abrasives actually include the various stones, Arkesan stones, chalks, corundum, emery, diamond, garnet, pumice, quartz, sand, tripoli, zirconium silicate, and also certain derivatives from the living organisms like cattle. And synthetic are which consist of some oxides there. So always think like there are some oxides like aluminum oxide, rauch, tin oxide, synthetic diamonds. All these come under the synthetic abrasives. So the question is, which of the following is not a natural abrasive? So Arkesan stones already we discussed, it is a natural abrasive. Pumice is a natural abrasive. Tripoli is a natural abrasive. So which is not a natural abrasive? The answer is rauch. So you have to keep in mind rauch is actually a synthetic or manufactured abrasive. Okay. And similarly tin oxide, don't confuse with zirconium silicate. Zirconium silicate is actually a natural abrasive agent. Next question, corrosion rate of nickel is reduced by. So there are various procedures being given here as option. First is coating the nickel with paint, coating the nickel with zinc, coating the nickel with aluminium, coating the nickel with chromium oxide. So we know that actually there are two terms being used in this section, that is corrosion and tarnish. Corrosion is always, it is not a superficial thing. It is actually in-depth chemical reactions that has been taking place. Okay, we know that it is wet corrosion is there, dry corrosion is there. So normally, for reducing the rate of corrosion of nickel, what we do is like, we apply a chromium oxide on the surface of nickel. That is a procedure how we actually reduce the corrosion rate of nickel. That is coating the nickel with chromium oxide. So another point that you have to keep in mind is chromium, aluminium and tin form very strong adherent oxide films on the surface to protect the corrosion. That is called as passivization. So what we do is like, in order to avoid other strong oxides being adhered to the surface of metals like nickel, what we do is like, we do a procedure called as passivization. So passivization is actually adherence of certain oxides onto the surface of the already existing metal. So here for corrosion rate, reducing the corrosion rate of nickel, we use various materials like chromium, aluminium, tin, etc. But you just see the option, there is aluminium and chromium, but which is more good in reducing the corrosion rate? That is chromium oxide. So the apt answer is the option 4, coating the nickel with chromium oxide. If there was no chromium oxide, then you would have gone for the answer, that is coating the nickel with aluminium. Okay, so based on the like options, you have to choose a correct answer. Next question, which of the following is not associated with corrosion? So we know that there are oxides being formed on corrosion, there are sulfides being formed on corrosion, there are chlorides being formed on corrosion. So which is not formed? Basically, carbonates are not associated with corrosion. That is a very important point that you have to keep in mind. Corrosion is not merely a surface deposit. Okay, it is actually a chemical reaction or an in-depth deterioration of the metal that is actually taking place because of the reaction with actually the environment forming various oxides. So we know that there are two types of corrosions, wet corrosion as well as actually dry corrosion. In chemical corrosion, and there is direct combination of the metallic and non-metallic elements to yield a chemical component through process such as oxygenation, halogenation, sulfonization. That three important point you have to keep in mind. That is why I added those points. The three important things is, first is oxidation that is taking place. Next is halogenation taking place, like various halogen like chlorides, etc. And sulfization taking place. So this three important reaction is being actually taking place when corrosion is being happening. So please keep this in mind. But carbonates are not formed in most of the cases. Okay. Next question, which is not present in porcelain. So as I told, porcelain is actually a ceramic and they consist of glass, they consist of actually feldspar, calcium carbonate. All the above three are actually present in porcelain. Amorphous material is not present in actually porcelain. For that, you have to know the basic materials that is present in porcelain and the advantage and or the use of adding each material. See this description. What is silica? Silica is actually the material that forms the glass former. It is actually the glass former that has been formed with the help of silica. What is feldspar? Feldspar is actually the main ingredient of that porcelain. Calcium carbonate is always added as a stabilizer. Now, the point that you have to memorize it, the porcelain glass form is having an amorphous gel structure, one set. But that doesn't mean that there is an amorphous material that is added to the porcelain composition. So please keep in mind, there is silica that is in the form of a glass former. There is feldspar, which is the main ingredient. Calcium carbonate is there, which acts as a very good stabilizer. Okay. Next question. The size of the sprue in casting, an average bicuspid MOD casting by centrifugal forces. So we know that we use sprue so that the molten metal actually flow into the created space. So normally for answering this, you have to know some theory part. Generally, the sprue former have a diameter between 8 to 18 gauge. And 8 gauge is 3 mm in diameter and 18 gauge is 0.3 mm in diameter. So more the diameter means we know that faster the metal will actually enter the space or the mold. So these are very important points that you have to keep in mind because the description that I've given has been asked multiple times, like in terms of different questions. So here, coming to this question, the size of a sprue in casting, an average bicuspid MOD casting by centrifugal force. So we know that normally for a sprue, it is having a size between 8 to 18. So the answer might be 10, the answer might be 12, the answer might be 16. This is a confusing question. So think about a bicuspid. Bicuspid is actually having a very small structure, right? So they have been considered it is a very small tooth where it needs much of a less molten metal or melt to enter the mold. So that is why they are going for the in between ratio, that is 12 gauge. So you have to keep in mind for premolars, they actually go to 12 gauge, or think that another two important point that you have to keep in mind is gauge for an inlay is 8 to 12 and gauge for an onlay is 10 to 40. Please keep these points in your mind. Next question. Animal test to check the biocompatibility of dental materials are all accept. First, so they have been specifically asked it is animal test. So we know that there are various types of tests being present, like in vitro test, in vivo test, usage test, animal test. And we have to know which are the tests or which are the tests that has been involved in each. Options include Buhler's test, second is implantation test, third is Ames test, fourth is sensation test. So you can actually memorize the animal test as SIB. I used to actually, or SBI, you can memorize as such, SBI. So the sensation test, B is Buhler's test, and I is implantation test. All the SBI come under animal test. So of course, Ames test is actually the test that is not included in the animal test. See, as I told, there are various types of tests: in vitro test, animal test, and usage test. So in vitro test, as we know that we won't be doing it in actually something contact. We are making it in having a direct or indirect contact with some biological structure which is done in a lab. That is very important. That is not done in an organism. If it is done in an organism, they change this to in vivo study. When it is done outside the body, say, take a tooth, take it into lab, do that. That is an in vitro study. There comes the Ames mutagenicity test and cytotoxic test. So please keep this in mind. Animal test, as I told, you can memorize it as SIB. That is a sensation test, Buhler's closed patch test, and implantation test. And usage test is actually being most clinically relevant tests performed either in animals or humans. That is actually comes in the clinical trial. That is an end test that has been used to find out the biocompatibility of dental materials. Hope you understood these important points. Next question, shrink-free ceramic is known as. So one among the following four is being called as a shrink-free ceramic. So how I memorize this is like, whenever we store a material properly, we know that it doesn't comes in contact with the environment, it doesn't shrinks, right? So you think like Cerastore, something has been stored. Okay, think like that. So Cerastore is actually a ceramic which is shrink-free. Okay, some other important points that you have to keep in mind is, first is again shrink castable glass ceramic. So which is the glass ceramic that can be actually casted? So answer for that is Diker. Okay, and shrink-free ceramic, as I told you can memorize, store that. So it is Cerastore. Next is injection molded ceramic. Memorize it as II. So it is IPS Empress. Glass infiltrated dental ceramic, all the in, since it is infiltrated, all the in comes under those. That is in-ceram, spinal. So please consider these codes at most so that you can actually answer some of the tricky questions that has been asked from ceramics. So shrink-free ceramic is known as Cerastore. Castable ceramic is Diker. Shrink-free is Cerastore. Injectable like IPS Empress. Next question. The best way to obtain a smooth, glossy finish on a porcelain restoration is by. So we actually undergo various procedure to make the ceramic or the porcelain surface very nice, very smoothly, very flowable. How is it? See the options. First, using a felt wheel and a fine diamond paste, first option. Second, glazing in a porcelain furnace. Third, using a felt wheel and aluminum oxide. D, using a felt wheel and silicon carbide. So, always a final finish. The question has been like glossy finish is always done by glazing the surface. So, glazing is actually a very important process where the porcelain surface is given a very smooth and glossy finish. Understood? So, glazed porcelain are always stronger when compared to the unglazed surface. Self-glazing can be produced by heating to its fusion temperature and maintaining for 5 minutes. That is how they give actually a glazed surface or a self-glazing, how self-glazing is done. The glass grain flow at the surface to form a vitreous glazy layer. So why I added this points is like, another question that has been asked in previous examination is like, how a self-glazing is actually achieved. So self-glazing is always achieved by heating the material to its fusion temperature and waiting for 5 minutes. So it will have a vitreous glazy layer. So keep in mind. Next question. The process of microscopic plate-like crystal nucleation and growth of crystalline material within the glass matrix. So you can just read that question twice. The process of microscopic plate-like crystal nucleation and growth of the crystalline material. So it is actually based on ceramic, right? So what happens is like the process is actually leading to a crystal nucleation, and the crystal has been actually embedded to the glass matrix that has been actually found out. So this is called a ceramic. You have to know this term. What is ceramic? Glass ceramic, we know that they are composite materials of glass glassy matrix phase and a crystal phase is there. After the glass particle is formed, nucleation and crystal growth are created by a controlled heat process called as ceramic. So, ceramics, as I told earlier, where we had a discussion, it consists of actually a glass on one hand and on the crystal phase on another hand. So, what should happen? We have to heat this such that there is nucleation and they should actually grow and they should actually embed within each other. So, when this is actually done in a controlled heat, it is actually called as ceramic. So this is very important term that you have to keep in mind. Ceramic is actually the conversion of the glass matrix and the crystal phase where nucleation as well as growth is taking place in a very controlled heating procedure. Next question. Which of the following has two different phase in solid state? So always think like it is eutectic. Eutectic means there is actually two different phases that is actually present in a solid phase. So important point again you have to keep in mind in here. What is solid solution? Solid solution is of course a homogeneous mixture of its alloying element in solid state. So that you have to keep in mind. It is actually the alloying element is actually in solid state. That is solid solution. Never think that it is a solution. It is in actually solid state, right? So eutectic alloy means it is actually two different phase that is actually in a solid state. Okay, intermetallic compound have wide range of solubility. That is the thing that you have to keep in mind. So these three, hope you understood. Since it is showing the two different phases in solid solution, it is eutectic. If it was like one phase in solid state, it is solid solution. Okay. Next question. The gap between the true end of casting ring and wax pattern should be. So we know that there is actually wax ring is being given on center of that wax pattern is being placed. So what is the distance between that? It is actually 1/4 of an inch. So 1/4 of the inch is actually required for proper casting to take place. Next question. What is the use of boxing and impression? Why we know that there are a lot of waxes or various impression components. So what the question is like particularly, what is the use of boxing and impression? So we know that whenever we box an impression, that is in order to actually pour the impression material into that, right? So boxing means while we give a box, always think that it is actually used to pour the impression material. So another important points that you have to keep in mind is boxing is another called as carding wax. Okay, so sometimes the question might be like, what is the use of the carding wax? So never get confused. It is actually, again, we have discussed in the previous slide, it is actually used to pour the plaster or stone into the impression material. Sticky wax, it is always used to attach the metal part during investment soldering. Bite or corrective wax is actually used for the impression of the edentulous ridge. Utility wax, it is also called as periphery wax. It is always used to give the contour to impression tray for when we use with an alginate impression material. Inlay wax to take inlay like wax pattern for inlays. Carving wax is like mainly for demonstration purpose, which we do in the pre-clinicals. Next question. Softening heat treatment is also called as. So we know that there are a lot of heat treatments that is actually done in metals, right? So what is the other name of softening heat treatment? It is annealing. Never get confused. So sometimes the question might be, what is the annealing time or annealing temperature for this material? Or sometimes the question might be like, what is a softening heat treatment for this material? So never get confused. Whenever you hear it is softening heat treatment, always keep in mind it is annealing that has been actually asked. Another question which was actually asked for APPSC in 2008, see, strain hardening, decreased ductility and distorted grain can be reverted by heating the metal to an appropriate temperature, what it is called. So a particular material is being actually reverted such that all the given properties is being actually reverted. So that is actually called as annealing. So annealing bring the strain hardening, decreased ductility, distorted grain, all these have been actually reversed by heating the metal in an appropriate temperature, that is actually called as annealing. Next question. Ceramics fired to metals are processed by. So the ceramic fired to metals, how we actually process that, that is actually called as sintering. So these are the various terms that you have to keep in mind. Early we had a discussion on annealing, that is entirely different. Here it is actually what is sintering. Whenever we fire the ceramic to metals, ceramics being fired to metals are processed by which method? It is called as actually sintering. So sintering is actually the process of always firing the ceramics so that the particles of the powder sinter together properly to form the processes or what PFM, what we need. That is called as actually sintering. We know that a large amount of powders are there, ceramic powders. We heat that. They fuse together. That is called as sintering. Understood? Other process of or other method of processing ceramics are of various types. Okay. So one is sintering, where we'll be actually firing the ceramic. Second is something called as hot pressing, where we use a hot pressing. For IPS Impress 2, that is a type of ceramic material where we do a hot pressing. Think one thing. The ceramic composition is being heated at various methods or various processing methods to form various ceramics which we see. Sintering is one process. Second is actually called as a hot pressing method, where IPS Impress 2 type of ceramics has been actually formed. Casting method is being actually used for Diker. Slip casting is actually used for in-ceram spinelay, in-ceram aluminum, in-ceram zirconium, etc. CAD-CAM is actually used for type of ceramics like Cerac, Vitablock, Ciron, lava, etc. is by the CAD-CAM mechanism, which is the most recent mechanism. It is actually used for fusing the particles of ceramics to form a fused ceramic. Copy milling is actually an old technique where a variety of ceramic products is being actually used. And C, sintering, where PFM, that is a porcelain or prosthetic or a ceramic for fused metal is being actually used. So this is a very important question, frequently being asked for the Kerala entrance examination. So you have to keep in mind. So always the ceramic is actually heated to form the entire surface, that is called a sintering. Sintering are of various types. Heat press is there, casting, slip casting, CAD-CAM, copy milling, sintering. Next question. Indium is alloyed or quaternary alloy where no tin is available for reaction belongs to which generation? For that, we have to know the various generations of alloys. First generation, second generation, third generation is there, fourth generation, fifth and sixth generation is there. And seventh is also there. That is actually the newer amalgam, where like most recent advanced like fluoride, etc. is being added. Just don't care about the seventh generation much. So talking about the first generation, that was the classical example that was given by G.V. Black, which contained 3 parts of silver and 1 part of peritectic alloy. That is actually, it is actually the copper, which, tin, which is actually present, 1 part of tin. Okay, second generation, again, what had added is like a very small amount of actually copper was added, and also zinc was actually added that act as a scavenger. High copper alloy is actually the third generation. Second generation is actually the kind of low copper alloy. So high copper alloy came into the third generation, where you have to know who actually introduced or developed this alloy were Ains and also Youdlis in the year of 1963. So AgCu, eutectic alloy, was added to low copper lath cut alloy. So copper actually joined together to form high copper. Fourth generation is quaternary alloy, which was added to actually like large amount of copper was added to 24 percentage, and the copper was very much firmly bounded to the tin. Fifth generation is where we added indium. Keep in mind, fifth generation is where we added indium. Fifth Fi. So memorize like indium. was added, and none of the tin is available for reaction, so there was no gamma 2 phase being formed. Sixth generation, where noble metal alloys like palladium was actually blunted to the earlier available first, second, and also the third generation. So hope you understood this. There are first, second, third, fourth, fifth. First is the classical example of 1:3 ratio. Second generation is like where we have actually applied the very low copper. High copper comes in 3. Fourth, about 24 percentage of copper. Fifth comes actually the indium. So the question is like, indium is alloyed. So it is actually the fifth generation that comes into play. Least soluble cement. So which is the least soluble cement? For that, we have to know the types of cement and the order of solubility from lowest to highest. So we know that there are resin cements is there, zinc oxide, zinc phosphate, zinc polycarbonate. So the order is from lowest to highest. So order of solubility is lowest in the resin cements, right? Then comes the zinc oxide cement, then comes the zinc phosphates and zinc polycarboxylate cement. Then comes the compomer, RMGIC and GIC. So order of solubility is lowest in the resin cement, going to the highest with the GIC and RMGIC. So the answer is least soluble cement is actually the resin cement. So composites, etc., we know that they doesn't actually move when something has been coming in contact like liquid, etc. Right. So please keep this in mind. The lowest solubility is seen in resin cement. So as it goes like towards the GIC, it is having the least strength. They often get soluble when comes in contact with the liquids. Incomplete casting is due to. So incomplete casting is actually, we know that sprue is a very important part through which the molten metal actually flows. So actually the incomplete casting is mainly because of the narrow sprue. Another important point you have to know is like incomplete casting is due to incomplete filling of the mold by the molten alloy, right? So for that, we have to consider the sprue. See the fourth point. Whenever there is a narrow sprue, that is one of the example for actually incomplete filling of the mold by the molten alloy taking place. So next option is like insufficient venting. If air cannot be vented quickly, that also actually prevent the flow of the molten material to the mold. High viscosity of metal. If more the viscosity is there, because of insufficient heating also, proper, if the wax is not completely eliminated, there also voids has been actually formed. So based on the question, which is the incomplete casting reason, so that is because of the narrow sprue size. Next question, temperature for brazing is. So brazing are of various types based on actually the temperature. Okay, so first of all, you need to know what is actually brazing. So we know that there is soldering, brazing, welding. All these methods are actually used for joining two metal or two pieces of metal together. So in welding, what happens is like two metal are must be actually similar. Welding actually uses very high temperature. While in the case of bracing is always used with the filler particles in between, and that act as a having a liquidus or have a temperature of 840 degree Fahrenheit. You need to know as Celsius also 450 degrees Celsius. Okay, that is a very important point. Welding, just think that high temperature. Brazing 840. Soldering, it is actually below 840. That is actually the important point that you have to keep in mind. So temperature for brazing is always more than 4,500. Okay. Next question. What is crocus cloth? What is crocus cloth? We know that there are actually large amount of finishing and polishing materials which we use. And this has been asked question, which we are not much familiar. That is why I added this question. What is crocus cloth? Crocus cloth is actually a material that contain iron oxide. Anything that contain iron oxide is actually called as rouge. So crocus cloth is iron oxide. Okay. So crocus cloth is actually abrasive sheet. We know that sandpapers, right? It is similar to that of actually abrasive sheet. So it consists of some ferric oxide surface on that, which has been loosely adhered. Okay. What is emery? Emery, you have to know, it is aluminum oxide, also called as corundum, and it is a combination of iron also. So crocus cloth is always having ferric, that is iron or rouge on that. Emery have aluminium and iron on that. Garnet is actually a combination of large amount of minerals like aluminium, cobalt, magnesium, ferrite, manganese, etc. Pumice is again which main content is silica. Keep in mind, Rouge, as I already told, it is a combination of iron. Wherever you hear Rouge, it consists of iron. Next question. The chemistry behind condensation of amalgam is to condense the unattacked gamma 2 particle, condense the unattacked gamma particle, condense the So what is the chemistry behind condensation? Why condensation of amalgam is required? Because we have to condense the unattacked gamma particle, because unattacked gamma particle is the structure that actually give the amalgam its strength. So always we condense the amalgam to actually protect the unattacked gamma particle. Some important point that you have to keep in mind, the main purpose of condensation is to bring the condensed unattacked gamma particle so that it will be as close as possible. Second question, what is the maximum allowable time after trituration for condensation? We have to condense for 3 to 4 minutes, very important, and the force range from 2 to 3 kilogram. These are some of the important points that you have to keep in mind here. So condensation is done to actually protect the unattacked gamma particles, because unattacked gamma particles are the structure which give strength to the amalgam. It is for 3 to 4 minutes and the force given is like 2 to 3 kilogram. Now, what is green shrinkage? Green shrinkage occurs in gypsum investment, ethyl silicate bonded investment, phosphate bonded investment, anhydrate of gypsum bonded investment. It is ethyl silicate bonded investment. So what happens is like during the drying process of ethyl silicate bonded investment, what happens is like there is the gel loses its actually alcohol, that is the ethyl and water, to form a concentrate hard gel. Okay, as might be expected, a volumetric contraction accompanies the drying, which reduces the size of the mold. This contraction is known as green contraction or green shrinkage, which is additive to setting shrinking. Hope you understood. So normally what happens is like whenever an investment is heated, there are byproducts being formed, right? So normally the byproducts formed in ethyl silicate based investment is like alcohol and water. So what happens is like there is shrinkage of the material taking place, and that kind of shrinkage is called as green shrinkage. Please keep this in mind. Next question, the property that is common in amalgam and ceramic is, so amalgam and ceramic actually have a very high compressive strength and low tensile strength. That you have to keep in your mind, because the amalgam and ceramic always have a very high compressive strength and very low tensile strength. What is the disadvantage of eugenol cement in zinc oxide eugenol? That is, we know that eugenol often, when it comes in contact with the composite, it actually inhibit or it actually affect the polymerization of the composite. That is a very important point we know. So another confusion will be whether it produces a gastric problem or not. Studies have shown that the eugenol in zinc oxide eugenol is a gastric irritant. So the answer for this question is both 1 and 2. That is, it inhibits the polymerization of composite, and also the gastric problem is being caused by the eugenol in zinc oxide eugenol. Next question, another question that was actually asked in AP 2000 is, eugenol may be replaced in the zinc oxide eugenol cement by dash. Ethoxybenzoic acid. That is another question, EBA. The vehicle of liquid carrier for eugenol free cement. Sometimes eugenol free cements are there, right? So what is the liquid there we use? It is benzoic acid. So in eugenol cement, you have to keep these two important points in your mind. Next question. The setting of zinc phosphate during setting is accelerated by. So zinc phosphate is accelerated by what method? Whenever we mix zinc phosphate, add a very small drop of water during mixing. So it actually accelerates the setting of zinc phosphate. So we have to know the various factors that affect the setting time. So we know that, first of all, talking about temperature, the greater the temperature of either the glass slab and the spatula will accelerate the setting time. One, powder liquid ratio. Greater the powder liquid ratio, they reduces the setting time. Rate of incorporation. Slower the rate of incorporation to the liquid, greater will be the setting time. It will take more of a setting time. Mixing time, the longer the mixing time means, slower will be the setting reaction. Moisture contamination, as I told earlier, when we add a very small drop of water, they actually it actually cool down the slab below the dew point, and actually it accelerate the setting reaction. Okay, this is another important points that you have to keep in mind. Thermal shrinkage in phosphate bonded cement investment occur due to the release of, as I told, we have already discussed in the ethyl silicate based here we have discussed the ethyl silicate based in the last slide, right? So, the ethyl silicate bonded investment, there alcohol has been produced. Here the question is like, which is being the byproduct in phosphate bonded investment. Always think phosphate bonded investment, it is actually NH3, that is the material that is released when heat is being given, and which leads to shrinkage. So some explanation for that. The earlier thermal shrinkage of phosphate bonded is associated because of the loosening or the decomposition of the binder, like the magnesium ammonium phosphate, and there is release of ammonia. Here ammonia, in ethyl chloride, there is what? Alcohol. Please keep this in mind. Very important question. Next question. Polycarbonate cement adhesive failure is mostly because of. It is always the cement prosthesis interface that is actually responsible for the failure in polycarboxylate cement. Okay. Next question. Which type of porosity is seen in case of rapid solidification of molten alloy? So if something actually sets very fastly, it is microporosities that actually take place. If we heat it in a very fastly for a very short period of time, microporosity is a type of porosity that is seen. Next question. Gas entrapment within the mold lead to which type of porosity? It is always the back pressure porosity. So this is some of the condition. If it is actually in a very short period of time, faster solidification, microporosity. If gas is actually entrapped in that, it is actually back pressure porosity. Next question. High fusing ceramic according to the classification of porcelainous. So you have to know the classification for this. See, there are high fusing ceramics, medium fusing ceramics, low fusing ceramics, and ultra low fusing ceramics. As I told earlier, for ceramics, we'll be applying heat, right? So for high fusing ceramics, it is 1300 degrees centigrade and more we will be giving. Medium fusing 1000 to 1300. Low means 800 to 1100 degrees centigrade. And ultra low fusing means less than 850 degrees centigrade will be actually used. So the answer for this question is like high fusing is like more than 1300 degrees centigrade. Next question. Transformation toughening of zirconium occurs due to change in phase from. So we know that normally ceramic materials will be actually making them to pass through various conditions where it is being made tough. So they are asking what is the phase change that is happening when we actually toughen zirconium. It is tetragonal to monoclinic. So that is the change that is happening place in zirconia, which makes them more of a tough matter. So we know that zirconium is actually seen in yttrium stabilized zirconium. Zirconium is actually seen in that. So what is like normally there are various forms in which zirconium is actually seen. Normally pure zirconium oxide is like a monoclinical structure. So what happens is like when to strengthen that, it changes from tetragonal to monoclinic phase based on the temperature change. Hope you understood that. So what happens is like normally to stabilize this, we normally add what yttrium to. That is why it is called as yttrium stabilized zirconium. That is because if this conversion keep on going, like tetragonal to monoclinic, what happens is like there will be 3 to 5 increased volume and cracks being formed. To reduce that, yttrium is added to stabilize the zirconium. Next question. In type 2 gold alloy, carat gold, type 2 carat gold is actually used in. It is 18K. Always think that 24 carat is type 1, that is the purest form. And 18K is actually the type 2, which is not that of a pure form. Next question. The process in which a material melted to form a crystalline phase and a liquid phase. So incognate melting, what is that? It is actually a process when we actually heat that, they forms two important phases. That is the crystalline phase and liquid phase. That is called as incognate melting. So ceramic we have already discussed in the earlier slides. To cure a heat cure resin, a proper heating cycle is necessary for. So why we have to actually give a proper heating cycle? That is always to actually prevent the porosities that is present. That is why we have to properly cure the heat cures. So some of the important points regarding this is like, and the question is being asked, if curing occurs at temperature more than 100 degree, porosity result in which area of the denture? So whenever we heat or cure a material where the more than 100 degrees centigrade, where the porosity occurs, it is in the hardest part, that is on the palate. That is hardest, thickest part, that is actually the central area. Next question. We have already discussed microporosities. As I told, when it's solidified very rapidly, there is something called as microporosities taking place. The imperfections seen on the lingual flanges of the lower. So always think upper palate, it is more than 100 degrees Celsius heat. Lower on the surface of the lingual surface of the denture, imperfection is basically because of rapid heating. It is microporosity. Next question. See, subsurface or internal porosity is found in that portion of the denture. It is the thick portion, that is like the palate. The concentration of gold alloy on solidifying is approximately. So what is the amount of gold alloy on solidification? It is 1.4. Solidification shrinkage is mainly seen in both gold alloy and base metal alloy. You have to know the value. It is 2 to 3 for the base metal, and normally for the gold alloy it ranges from 1.25 to 1.65 percentage. Which of the following is correct? Type 1 and type 2 gold can be heat treated and annealed. Type 3 and type 4 gold can be heat treated and annealed. Type 1 and type 4 gold can be heat treated and annealed. All the type of gold can be heat treated. It is type 3 and type 4 gold that can be annealed. That is, type 3 and type 4 gold can be hardened by heat treatment if they contain sufficient amount of copper. Type 1 and type 2 cannot be hardened because they have actually no copper. So this is the difference between the type 1 to type 4 type of gold, where type 3 and type 4 can be heated and annealed. Okay. So that is for today's discussion. We have discussed most of the important topic from ceramics and some of the cement part, etc. Hope you had a nice class. Any doubts, please revert back to the Edentu team. All the best. Do well. Have a quick revision again by seeing this video. Thank you.